My name is Charlie Starkman. I am a staff psychologist and the outreach coordinator at Counseling and Psychological Services, or CAPS. I'm excited to be able to present this workshop today entitled, What's the Function? All About Emotion. I think that right now, especially in the COVID-19 era, we are faced with our emotions on a level that we haven't been before. A lot more time to sit with our thoughts, and naturally our thoughts lead to feelings. A lot of times surrounded by people in our lives who might evoke very strong emotions from us, and as a result, we're feeling a lot. And I think it's important for us to recognize that our emotions have a function, they play a purpose. And so I'm very excited to be able to share more about that with you today. So we're going to start by talking about, if I can get this thing to, there we go. So we're gonna start by talking about why do we have emotions. So it's important to recognize that our emotions are extremely important, and understanding why we have our emotions can help us not only to better understand ourselves, but also our general context in our environment and what's taking place around us. So I'm going to be using the tenets of dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT. If you've tuned into any of my past workshops or a lot of those of my colleagues, we will incorporate a lot of aspects of DBT into our work, because it's very, very helpful in better understanding our emotions and being able to regulate them. So there are three main reasons why we have emotions, and I'll just list them here and we'll get into more detail in the next slide. But the first reason why we have emotions is that they motivate us for action. Our emotions also communicate and influence other people around us. And emotions also communicate important messages to ourselves. And so let's dive into these a bit more. So first, emotions motivate us for action. Now, our emotions are divided into primary and secondary emotions. So I kind of look at the primary emotions, shame, sadness, joy, etc. These are hardwired into us. We all experience them, and these emotions biologically prepare our bodies for action without us really having to put in a lot of effort. And this can save us crucial time in a situation where we might be threatened, or there might be concerns that we might not know the best way to act, but our emotions help motivate us to approach the situation in an effective way. And as a result, these emotions can help us to overcome obstacles or challenges. And that might be, again, internal or external in our environment. Emotions also communicate and influence others around us. So our emotions are often associated with body language. So that could be our facial expression if we're smiling, or if we're angry, our posture if we're sitting upright and listening and intent, if we're relaxed, or if we might be slumped over, if we feel sad or down, and also our tone of voice. If we're nervous, we might talk a lot quieter, and if we're angry, we might talk a lot louder. So I'm not much of an actor or anything, but I hope that kind of conveyed the general way that our emotions are related to our body language and the way we carry ourselves. And as a result, this means that others can catch a glimpse of what's going on for us emotionally and into our own emotional world. And we might not always like it, but it's important to remember that we're always communicating to other people, whether that's through language, through verbal means, or the nonverbal cues that we're giving off about what we're experiencing emotionally. And we'll talk more later on about how we can better use this to our advantage. And lastly, emotions communicate to ourselves. And I sort of sum this up as our gut instinct. So I'll always say, go with your gut, right? I believe very strongly in going with intuition and vibes and just your gut about a situation, because typically our gut can lead us in a good direction. So we want to think about it that way. I usually find that to be pretty helpful. Okay, so now we are going to do a reflection activity. And if you'd like, you can feel free to share your answers in the chat box. But if you have a pen and paper or a tablet, anything that you can write on, we're going to go through a series of 3 questions. So first, when has an emotion helped motivate you to act quickly in a situation? And it might be helpful to think about fear, anxiety, anger. And one example might be, a time that your anxiety about a test actually motivated you to prepare for it in a more effective way. So that might be creating a study guide and taking time each evening, maybe 45 minutes to an hour, to really look over it, to know the material to help reduce the overall level of anxiety that you're feeling. And the anxiety that was created helped motivate you to act in a certain way in a situation. So test anxiety is often something that students will come in to CAPS as a presenting concern. So I like to use that example, and that our anxiety is not always a negative thing, and in fact, it can help motivate us to reach our potential. All right. So our second question is thinking about how you communicate your emotions to others, and what effect have you seen this emotional communication have on others? And think about relationships and whether or not this is beneficial or detrimental to your relationships. So we can think about it this way. We don't have to think about all the times that we might be upset or angry. Sometimes it just is obvious through our actions. So for example, maybe you might be upset or angry at someone and you put in headphones and turn away from them and avoid eye contact. You might appear withdrawn or slouched or not smiling. And what this really communicated was this desire for someone to ask you what's wrong and someone to check in with you. However, we have to consider, did that display of emotion effectively communicate that? Probably not. Instead, it more so communicated that you want others to stay away and you didn't want to be bothered. So move on to the third question for reflection. Have you had a gut instinct that turned out to be correct? And how might your emotions have been communicating to you? So for this question, it might help to think about maybe a time when your emotions have communicated when you've done a good job at work. So after that successful day at work, you leave and you're feeling really upbeat, energized, creative, and aligned with your values. So you might remember way back when we first started these workshops and I presented on ACT. And a key component of ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, is connecting with one's values. And as our emotions communicate to us that we had a really good day at work and that we were doing a really wonderful job, that's going to be more in line with the values that help guide us to be the best employee that we can. So these internal feelings can signal that gut instinct that you're doing what you are meant to do. So I kind of liken this to having a really good day with clients, that day where you just feel on, like you're really listening to what your clients are saying, where you just feel connected. And it's really important to kind of think about it in that way. So in the interest of time, again, we're going to continue to move on, but feel free to share anything in the chat feature, or to just save your answers and reflect upon them as you move forward in thinking about all of these different situations and the ways in which our emotions work for us. So we have a lot of beliefs about emotions, and these ideas are carried throughout our lives, and it can make living with our emotions really challenging. And on the following slide, I've included a series of statements, and we'll go through, and I want everyone to identify why you believe these statements or why you disagree with these statements. And again, might be helpful to write down your responses or just internally reflect, again, using that very helpful chat feature if you feel comfortable, and just really connecting with what these beliefs mean to you. So there are a series of 7 emotion statements that I like to talk about with clients who are struggling in this area. And the first is there is a right way and a wrong way to feel in every situation. And this statement is telling us that our emotions have to automatically dictate the way that we approach a situation. The second statement, being emotional means being out of control. So in times when we might experience an emotion very strongly, that might bring up almost like an alarm that something is wrong here. This is not how we should be approaching a situation. We should be able to keep ourselves in line. And it's not always the case. Sometimes being able to connect to our emotions can help us better understand a situation and what we're feeling, both internally and externally. The third statement, all painful emotions are a result of a bad attitude. So we know that this statement in particular, we can challenge the accuracy of it by sort of looking at situations that naturally elicit pain, like the loss of someone close to us. That's going to bring up very, very strong feelings of grief and sadness. And clearly that had nothing to do with attitude. That was elicited by a very painful event, and painful events will typically bring up painful emotions. The fourth statement, creativity requires intense, often out of control emotions. I like to sort of think of this as as like an artist who might feel inspired by very intense feelings and just sort of being all over the place to create their best work. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. We can be at our most creative when we're at our most regulated and most connected to what we're feeling without it having to be over the top or out of control. It is inauthentic to try and change my emotions. So we might recognize that, with this statement, our emotions are just naturally changing even minute by minute, right? So again, something that we don't even have control over, especially with our hardwired primary emotions, right? Those are going to be shifting regardless of anything that we're doing to try and change it. And my emotions are who I am. This one is often a really common statement that's hard for people to separate from. If a person is depressed and maybe they've been chronically depressed or depressed for a long time, they see themselves as just a perpetually sad person. They ignore all of their other strengths and other feelings that they do experience, but they see themselves solely as a sad, miserable person, which leaves out so many other aspects of who this individual actually is. And lastly, our emotions should always be trusted. Now, this one is important because we have to think about it as emotions are not facts, right? And so unless we know that this emotion is a fact and we've really examined it in the context and whatever else we're noticing, we can't trust what we're feeling in every single situation. You know, even though we've talked about gut instinct and how we're communicating that to ourselves, that doesn't apply to every single situation, right? We can't say that. So it's important to remember that our emotions are not facts, and we can't always trust them. They might be off. And what do all of these statements have in common? They're all emotion myths. And these emotion myths are beliefs that we may have due to the way in which we were raised, our peers, media, etc. So basically the larger culture and environment around us. And these influences affect the way that we view our emotions as a whole. And if anyone can think about those statements from the previous slide, just another quick look, I'm going to challenge you to think about coming up with your own challenge to it. And this is important to really push yourself to think about the ways in which those statements are myths and the ways in which they aren't accurate in your life, because we all have emotion myths that we either consciously believe we're very fused to, or subconsciously believe that we might not even realize that we're fused to and that we believe in very strongly, even if there aren't facts to back it up. And as a result, our beliefs in these myths can often lead to behaviors or thoughts that don't really serve us in the long term. And it's really important to think about that difference between the short term and the long term. So now that we've talked about some emotion myths, it's important to think about the ways in which our emotions matter. And I've chosen three emotions: anger, fear, and sadness. And we'll go through each and think about how our emotion matters, that specific emotion, as well as the factors that might increase the strength of this emotion. So let's start with anger. Anger often occurs when an important goal is blocked, or someone you care about or yourself might be attacked or threatened, or losing power perhaps, or respect, feeling like your status has dropped, and also not having things turn out as expected. I think we could also link this back to our current situation, right, with COVID. And this has definitely put a wrench in what a lot of people planned for their 2020 to look like, right? And that might bring up strong feelings of anger. And physical and emotional pain. Ultimately, pain can drive feelings of frustration, irritation, and ultimately anger. And some factors that might increase anger. So ruminating on an event. Oh, we've got something in the chat. Okay. So Kamara says, in response to the myths, yes, sometimes I find it difficult to separate how I'm feeling from who I am. I like this. My coworker recommends say, I am feeling anxious instead of I am anxious. That's wonderful. You're inserting that extra word there, I am feeling, right? So that it's not linked to you, or even like I'm having the thought that I am X, Y, or Z. Really good. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, let's look at fear. Fear often comes from feeling threatened, right? Or being reminded of a situation where you've been hurt in the past. Fear might stem from having flashbacks to a traumatic event, feeling fearful when we're in a place where we're silenced, unfamiliarity, or being alone or in crowds, right? And again, this can relate to the current situation and thinking about, COVID impacting the health and well-being of ourselves and those around us, right? And it does feel very threatening because it is something that, is not always within our direct control, right? And there are certain factors that can increase fear. That might be the belief that you're helpless, that you don't have any control over the situation, that you could lose someone or something that's very important to you. Fear can also stem from concerns about rejection or fears that someone might not like you. Embarrassment can often increase fears. So we think of like the fear of public speaking, right? We don't want to embarrass ourselves or look foolish. Also beliefs that we might fail or that we're incompetent in some way. And also thinking about sadness. Sadness can come from losing someone, someone close to us dying, the unexpected change in a situation. Rejection often brings up feelings of sadness, as well as isolation and pain. And let's look at some of the factors that might increase sadness. One of the most important is this belief that you will never get what you want or need in your life. That feeling that nothing is ever going to work out the way that I'd like it to, right? And again, it's that perspective of feeling hopeless, or this belief that we are worthless. And those are some of the main signs that someone might be depressed if they're consistently experiencing feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness. Let's see, can I click? All right. So how do we handle these difficult emotions? So we just discussed events that might trigger some distressing emotions, as well as how our thoughts or different beliefs can increase this distress. And I'm going to challenge everyone to think about, what if we use this information to our advantage? What if we looked more at challenging our own thoughts and actions so that we can reduce the intensity of our emotions instead? Because sometimes we are fearful and scared of the intensity of what we're feeling. And it's that reduction of intensity that is ultimately the goal. Not to completely rid ourselves of the emotion, but to reduce its intensity so that it doesn't feel as overwhelming. Okay, now I'm gonna go through and we're gonna do a mindfulness practice activity called Label It to Diffuse It. And it will take around 5 minutes. And the goal of this practice is to become aware of your emotions, to be able to label them, and use compassion in order to self-soothe. So there are different ways that we can approach this, and I just included a note, if you're uncomfortable closing your eyes or remaining still, you can walk slowly around the room that you're in, or keeping your eyes open, but fix them gently on a specific spot, maybe on the wall, or just looking at something that helps to ground you. So what I would like everyone to do is start by finding your seat. Start by finding a comfortable, quiet place to sit in a dignified posture, which is relaxed but upright, tranquil and alert. Close your eyes fully or partially, and take a few deep breaths to allow your body to relax. Shift attention to the sensations in your body. Bring your awareness to your body by noticing your posture. Feel the world of sensation occurring within your body at this very moment. Now place your hand, excuse me. Now place your hand on your heart and begin to feel your breathing. The out breath and the in breath. If it's easier, just focus on one and rest, waiting for the next breath. Do this for another minute. And if along the way you'd like to let your hand slowly fall to your lap, feel free to do so. And when you get distracted, come back to the breath. When you notice your mind has wandered, as it always does, Gently come back to your breath as a touch point again. And as you continue this mindfulness of breathing, notice what emotions begin to surface. Shift your attention from your breath and ask yourself, what am I feeling? What emotions am I feeling right here and right now? If you sat down for this exercise without any strong emotions, perhaps you're feeling contentment, or perhaps you're curious, or maybe there's another emotion inside, such as longing or yearning, or perhaps sadness or joy or worry, perhaps a sense of urgency, maybe loneliness, or maybe you're bursting with pride or feeling loss or envy. Maybe you're having a lot of feelings. Label the most prominent emotion or emotions. Try to identify the strongest feeling that you're having and name it quietly in the midst of your feelings, and using your body as an antenna, picking up the faint signals that first let yourself be aware what emotions are percolating in your body. And when you have an emotion and you have a name for it, have a label for it, then repeat that name 3 times in a kind and gentle voice. For example, worry, 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 joy, joy, joy. Return to your breath and feel your breath. And now go back and forth between your breath and your emotions in a relaxed way. Continue to shift between the breath and the emotion you are holding. So when you feel the emotion, label it, and then return to your breath. If you feel overwhelmed by the emotion or it's very disturbing, then just stay with your breath until you feel better. Show yourself loving kindness. Breathe, feel each breath, and keep your hand over your heart, feeling the warmth of your hand and the loving kindness, the goodwill that's within you, and feeling that innate goodwill. And breathe through your heart, recognizing what's inspired you to undertake this exercise and that wish to be happy and free from suffering. And when the emotion arises, or sweeps away your attention, just label it and then return to your breath. And now, open your eyes. Slowly open your eyes if they have been closed, and bring your attention back to the room. And as you go about your day, know that you can always find refuge in your breathing, and most emotions can be made more workable by labeling them. Now that our attention is back to the room, we're going to look at self-soothing and thinking about how we can continue to use this in difficult times, such as the one that we're in right now, and how we can become aware of how to self-soothe as we gain greater awareness of our emotions, and that this allows us to step back and make a different choice in order to handle our emotions effectively. And it's important to recognize that sometimes our emotions are too strong and we have difficulty tolerating the distress of the moment. And during these times, this is when we can practice self-soothing using our 5 senses. And this builds on grounding, which I talked about in my my second to last workshop, and thinking about how we are able to self-soothe using our senses and really connecting to them. So we'll go through each briefly. Start with sight, things that are pleasing to look at. Be nature. Right now I'm looking out my window and it is pouring rain, but oftentimes I find rain, looking at that, very comforting. You can also think about combining the senses, looking at a piece of art, reading a magazine, watching videos. Sound. What is pleasing for you to hear? Again, rain. There's a lot of comfort that comes from hearing the rain, maybe waves, a soft voice. Smell. What is pleasing to smell? Maybe coconut, chocolate. I have a candle, thinking of my own place, my vanilla candle that I really love. Smell is one of the strongest connections that we have to memories. Excuse me. Touch. What is pleasing to touch? Perhaps it's a soft blanket, your pet, a nice pair of sweatpants or a sweatshirt. Weighted blankets are often very comfortable. And lastly, how can we self-soothe by noticing what is pleasing to taste? Maybe a strong mint, pop rocks to help redirect your focus away from a strong emotion. Comforting tastes are helpful, maybe a cup of tea, coffee. What connects you to this moment? What is pleasing for you? Bringing all of this together and thinking about maybe creating your own self-soothing kit and keeping it somewhere safe and accessible. You can make it into a physical kit, maybe keeping things in a shoebox or a tote bag. It might help some folks to make a list of it, maybe keeping it in your phone, posting it somewhere that you can see it often. You get that cue. Try to be as specific as possible while also making sure that what you wrote down are accessible to you. So let's say that you want to use you like pop rocks, and that is your strong taste sensation. If you need to use it, make sure that you have it readily available. Oops. There we go. Now we're going to talk about opposite action, which is a strategy to help regulate emotions. And in the DBT world, opposite action is helpful and can be used when our initial reaction to an emotion is not effective in the long term. So let's think about anger. When we're angry, we might have the urge to break something. We might end up picking up our phone, throwing it at the wall. And in the moment, we might feel a bit better after we throw the phone, right? But we still feel angry. And as a result, our phone screen might be cracked. There's a hole in the wall. And maybe we have to now pay to fix the phone screen. There are going to be other consequences. Maybe you live with roommates or your family, and they're wondering, why is there a big hole in the wall? And naturally, they're going to be upset. And opposite action is important because we often react to strong emotions in ways that can actually make it even stronger. So with anger, instead of immediately getting to that point where we just want to throw or break something, we can practice this skill. And opposite action looks like doing the exact opposite of the original urge that you have when you were experiencing that emotion. So let's look at a couple of examples. So with the previous example, there are different ways that the individual could have practiced opposite action, maybe handled the situation in a more effective way. They could have tried gently stepping out of the room, taking a step back from the conversation that is causing anger, making a conscious effort not to reach for their phone. And this is often challenging, but seeing if you're able to think of an opposite thought, thinking about the facts of the situation. Are there any good reasons for the situation causing the anger? Can we take a second to step back and think about where the other person is coming from? Can we devise or imagine reasons that make sense for the situation to occur in the specific way that it's played out? And the ultimate way of practicing opposite action in this situation would be to do something kind. And that is often very hard to do when we are in the heat of our anger. But even thinking about it from the perspective of, even just smiling or asking, asking them to, asking for help, something along those lines, but really thinking about, how do we better approach the situation in a way that is beneficial for us, and that it's not worsening the already strong emotion, intensifying it in a way that it's already present. So what I'd like for everyone to do is to create a list of an action urge and the opposite actions that could be used for each of the 4 following emotions. So you can choose to write these down, mentally note them, and if you're able to come up with the action urge and the opposite action, you'd like to share it in the chat, please feel free to do so. I'll give everyone a minute or two to get some ideas down and see what you come up with. And if no one is able to or not comfortable sharing, totally fine. But this is a good way to practice using this skill. And also, thank you for bearing with me. My throat is a little dry, so I apologize for the throat clearing. But thank you very much for bearing with me. Okay, let's see. Sadness, yes, to distract myself, allowing self to feel the sadness. Excellent. That is exactly what that action urge and opposite action would look like for sadness, something that I know I would be working on with clients. Thank you so much for sharing that. You've already either practiced opposite action or you have gotten it very quickly, which is awesome. And some of these are more challenging to think about. For example, with jealousy, might be hard to immediately think of the urge. I like to think about it as that urge to immediately control the actions of others. We want them to act in ways that are consistent with what we want to see, right? Whereas the opposite action might be to try sharing the things and people in your life. Oftentimes when we feel shame, we might have the action urge to forget or even to self-destruct. that opposite action would be to gently face the person that might be linked to us feeling that shame, or to practice healthy self-care. Maybe this is a good situation to utilize some of those self-soothing techniques. And really, those could be used in almost any of these situations as opposite actions, but shame can be one of those situations to consider implementing the self-soothing. Okay. Let's see, it's not clicking. There we go. So to conclude, emotions are always changing, and I like to think of it as riding the wave, right? They are like waves. They're crests and troughs, and sometimes no waves at all. And waves might be large, and it might seem like one wave is just coming one right after the other, and we just can't seem to catch a break. And there are also going to be times when things around us are calm, and we might see either very small waves or just a still body of water. And in conclusion, being able to surf our emotions using mindfulness and some of the skills we've learned today can help make the waters more manageable. And that concludes today's workshop. If anyone has any questions, feel free to share those in the Q&A box. Don't see any quite yet. Let's see, we've got something in the chat. Okay, thank you, very helpful. Thank you for attending. I appreciate that. And again, just a reminder that CAPS is available to students in this difficult time. We are providing individual therapy as well as workshops, and everything can be found on our website. We have a resource page up and running. We post our workshops every Friday from the week, and you can find them all there. We also have a YouTube channel, the UM-Dearborn Wellness Collaborative, that also features the different workshops that staff have been putting on over the past couple of months. If you have any questions at all or are interested in beginning counseling, you can email umdearborncaps@umich.edu. And I hope that all of you stay well and stay healthy and safe during this time. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And I hope that you have a wonderful weekend and be well. Thank you.